Hello, my lovely law enthusiast humans. Thank you so much for joining me once again. And is it after 1 in the morning and I was getting ready for bed and then forgot that I needed to do this video? Yeah. Anywho, I'm FCA. Welcome back to my channel. We are covering the Karen Read retrial, and I am not a legal expert of any kind. I consider myself an outside juror who's doing recaps and summaries. And before somebody tries to come at me with, you can't do that because you're not a legal person professionally, you don't have to be a professional chef to know how to bake. So, there we go. That is what I make that similarity all the time. So we are talking about day 31, which, spoiler alert, turns out to be the last day. We have a surprise ending coming up. I mean, I was legitimately shocked and taken aback when it happened. But we'll get there when we get there. Let's start at the beginning. So we continue with Dr. Rentschler, who was asked about why he was here in this case. And he had said in the first trial that he was there to say what testing he had done and how he had done the testing for the people who had hired him, who had hired ARCA at the time. And that this time he was hired as a client to be a biomedical an analyzer to go against and analyze the report of Dr. Welcher from Aperture Science, hired by the Commonwealth. And so he was Jackson reiterated that there were no injuries to the head, that there were no injuries to the hand. And he also brought up, Dr. Rentschler did, that he saw the x-rays from the medical examiner's office. And that's how he knew about that there were no injuries to the hand, that there were no other injuries to the rest of the body, that there was only a brain injury. He knew that from examining the medical examiner's report and seeing the x-rays that she had taken. Just a reminder, Welcher claimed that there were no x-rays. So everyone was confused and was like, oh, well, we don't have x-rays. But 2 additional people have seen the x-rays. So, and then he went on to ask about the video testing that Dr. Welcher had shown from his presentation about the test he did about the injuries on the arm. You remember the paint test? And he was asked, Jackson asked Dr. Rentschler what he made notes of, what he observed about the testing. And he said, well, first of all, there were no measurements. And Dr. Welcher had tried to explain this, if you recall before. He didn't have measurements to measure. He didn't know the position of John O'Keefe exactly. He was told information by the Commonwealth, by Brennan, that they wanted a reconstruction done, they being the Commonwealth, a reconstruction done of a man of John O'Keefe's height and weight, roughly, holding a drinking glass, and his arm getting hit by an SUV backing into him. That was the information that he was given. And the reason why the Commonwealth was holding on to that is because the bread and butter of their case, what Brennan is super, maybe too far, relying on, are the words of Karen Read from the interview. And because she had noted in the interview that when she was trying to unbury John when she first found him, and she was taking the snow off of his face, she picked a piece of glass from his nose. And so there was a broken drinking glass found at the scene. She said she had picked glass from his nose, and we have a broken taillight, and there were pieces of glass found on her bumper. So they said he was holding the drinking glass, it smashing into it is what caused the taillight to break, and then further damage by hitting John O'Keefe, causing the cuts on his arm, and then he fell backwards, and hence the rest of the injuries. but he didn't have any lower body extremities, and that's lower body injuries. Yeah, his lower body extremities. He doesn't have lower body injuries. And that's important because if you see here, Welcher, in the aperture testing, he is standing in a certain way. It's because he could not stand closer to the SUV because the Commonwealth had asked him to replicate getting injuries only to the arm and not to the rest of the body, because that's what happened to John O'Keefe. Not only were there no measurements done, but Dr. Rentschler noted that Dr. Welcher, who he kept referring to as the surrogate he was standing in as the body for John O'Keefe, as opposed to using a crash test dummy, that for this paint test, he only did it once. He did not do multiple tests. He did not do tests at multiple speeds. He did not do tests at other possible angles, even though Welcher himself had said they didn't know the position of John O'Keefe when he was on the stand. He was like, so we couldn't account for every little thing because that's information they didn't have. Well, then why didn't you test for it? He goes, we didn't know to test, we didn't have it. But you had this, and Welcher had said, that's what the Commonwealth asks us to look for, and that is what the testing. I did testing that replicated what I was going to testify to on the stand. AKA, he was using confirmation bias and only testing for the outcome he wanted and not anything else. So we only have one test done by Aperture Science. And the one test they did, they only did it once. Not with multiple colors of paint, not at different angles, not even the same angle at different speeds. Nothing. One test with no measurements, one time. And Aperture Science was paid $350,000 from the Commonwealth. Now, how much of that money went personally to Dr. Welcher or Shannon Burgess, I don't know. But we do know for sure that the Commonwealth paid Aperture Science $350,000 to do this one paint test one time. And I guess make the slideshow presentation. Well, that was okay because Dr. Rentschler had been asked to analyze that test and the videos and the reports. And he said that not only did he find it inaccurate that they only did the test one time in one particular scenario, but he made note that in the video, and I will try to clip it if I can, otherwise the clip will be linked below. It'll be the first one, and then you can watch the whole stream trial right below that. You can see Dr. Welcher, as the clip goes, he rolls into it. He moves his arm. His arm is like this. And as the SUV backs up, he moves his arm forward because otherwise it would not have been hit. At the angle we see here, if the SUV continued along that line, the rest of his arm would not have been hit by the SUV. And Rentschler points out that not only that, but he kind of rolls his shoulder forward and off of the SUV. And he did it to say, yeah, this placement could cause the injuries to that. But he never measured John O'Keefe's arm. He never measured where the individual spots of cuts were on the arm. And he never explained or did any testing to show the pattern, how the pattern occurred. And we already have other witnesses who say that when an injury is caused by a broken object, it's usually uneven, wild, and it's not as consistent paternally because there's different points sticking out at different angles. So there's going to be different abrasions and cuts, etc., going all different directions. Rentschler had up where it shows all of the pattern, they're all going a particular direction. So they likely happened at a very similar point in time, but they're all consistently being pulled one direction. He also noted that Dr. Rentschler, holding his arm up like this to indicate the glass being held. Two things of note Dr. Rentschler brings up. There are internal cuts, and I will put up that picture here. There are internal cuts on the inside of the elbow. If the elbow was bent, if the arm was bent at this angle, this would not have been cut by the SUV because it would have been tucked in. That John O'Keefe's arm was likely extended in some way. Also, holding a glass and having his hand exposed and being the thing directly hit by the SUV, because again, the Commonwealth is claiming that the glass John O'Keefe was holding is what broke the taillight. Why were there no injuries to the back of the hand? And he showed, again, I will put up the photo where he shows the hand and the different knuckles and the metacarpals and all those things. And he goes, none of these things, because the knuckles holding a glass, holding a cup, your knuckles are exposed. So if he was holding that out and his hand holding the glass hit the taillight, there should have been injuries to John O'Keefe's hand. The last thing that was brought up about the video of the paint thing was that being hit in the arm, being sideswiped by a car, would not cause a person to fall backwards. He said it's physically impossible to have your arm hit and that caused you to fall backwards. You'd fall to the side. You would go with the direction of the body. So if a car backed into you, you're getting thrown that way. Not at a side angle to get your arm hit and somehow you get thrown backwards. Rentschler even points out the idea of what is called somersaults. And somersaults, or fender somersaults, are what happens when somebody is hit by a vehicle. But when they're hit, they're kind of hit at an angle where they go up and over the fender. And he's like, that's not what happened here. There is no indication of that. And that really only happens to the front of the car. You get hit going backwards, you don't go over the vehicle. You go backwards. A number of slides about the testing that ARCA did because they cared about all of the numbers. If you remember, we heard from Dr. Welcher at least 3 times say that he didn't care about this number, he didn't care about that number, he didn't care about this, that, the other thing. ARCA cared about all the numbers according to these testings. They did multiple angles of multiple speeds and multiple directions multiple times. Okay, this happened this time, let's do that same test again. And it shows how many times they did the test. And they pointed things out about the hand injuries, how fast things were going, the force that something needs. And what's particularly noticeable is that he pointed out that the force needed to break a human hand was, I believe, the car going at the slowest speed they tested surpassed the number of minimum force needed to break a hand. So if John O'Keefe was hit by a car, he should have been hit, he should have had a broken hand. Cross-examination. There are a few things to note about cross-examination. One, Brennan was an a-hole. He was an a-hole to Dr. Wolf during his voir dire, and he was an a-hole now. 3 times he was told by the judge to not use commentary in his question because he had said, oh, do you think this is funny? Can we get back to my question? Are you done ranting? And every time Jackson objected. And the judge said, sustained. Mr. Brennan, no commentary, just ask your questions. Mr. Brennan, no commentary, ask your questions. And Jackson started going, objection, Your Honor, he needs to be admonished. And she had the audacity to say, Mr. Jackson, your objections have been noted for appeal. And he called for them to go to sidebar, as he should, because when he had made a comment and then they were on the record but not in front of the jury, the judge went at him so hard about him not being allowed to make commentary, that he only had to ask questions, that he needed to watch himself. And here Brennan is in front of the jury making unnecessary rude commentary 3 times, and he should have been punished, like told, you cannot make commentary, Mr. Brennan. You are to ask questions and have it be a firm, scolding in front of the jury, because Brennan wasn't listening. He wasn't learning. He was disregarding the judge's statement entirely, because he did it over and over and over. And this is not the first time that he did that. He's done it with a lot of other people. And the judge has either let it go or sustained the objection but didn't take it any further. Mr. Brennan did not ask any questions about the testing that ARCA did. And you want to know why? The testing blows Welcher out of the water. And Dr. Rentschler's testimony is what Brennan has been afraid of this whole time. I've been saying it this whole trial, that Brennan is afraid of whatever ARCA's going to say, because he has fought so hard and so viciously to keep ARCA out, to limit what they could say, to keep out their new reports, which was the whole reason that they were hired back in the first place, was for their reports to rebut Dr. Welcher and Shannon Burgess. So the reason is because of all of the testing. And he didn't ask him about testing once. In fact, I thought I got shot back in time for a minute, because Brennan had asked him if he was chatting it up with the defense team. And he goes, yeah, I had communications with them. And then he was asked, didn't you, after you testified in the last proceedings, didn't you eat lunch with them? And he goes, yeah, there was lunch ordered, and I sat in the same room as them, and we had lunch. And he goes, and did you talk with them, laugh with them, chat with them? And he was like, if something funny was said, I probably laughed. I don't remember what was said. I really wasn't paying attention. How long did you have lunch with them? And he went, I don't know how long it takes to eat a ham sandwich. I remember I had a ham sandwich and something to drink. And he goes, I was sitting there, I ate my food, and then I left. He said there wasn't really anything of note coming on. I'm not chums with the defense team. And Brennan is just doing that. It's similar to the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial, when Elaine Bredehoff was sitting there going after Johnny Depp's psychology expert about her bringing muffins to a meeting. And did you have muffins? Did you have dinner at Johnny Depp's house? And she was like, well, I met with my client, and he is a client who, due to his celebrity status, is housebound. So I had to go to him, because he's trying to make it seem like Rentschler isn't some third-party outsider who did some testing. He's buddies with the defense. We'll say that, unlike Dr. Wolf, Dr. Rentschler was a lot more, comparatively, more combative and a little more argumentative, and had a little bit more snark to him, but not a lot, just a little bit, more than Dr. Wolf had information from, because he got it from Welcher. Brennan had the audacity to ask Dr. Rentschler about how much he was getting paid, and Dr. Rentschler said the exact same thing that Dr. Wolf did. I don't know how much I specifically got paid for this project. What you were getting paid? He goes, I am getting paid. You're not doing this for free. I'm not doing it for free. I did my job. How much are you getting paid? I don't know. I don't know what how much did ARCA charge? I don't know what ARCA charged. I don't know what they're getting paid. I'm not in billing and finances. That's a separate department. I'm in engineering and reconstructionist. I did my job. I get paid a salary, and that's what I know. I turn in my billing time. I get paid a salary. And he was asked if he had considered Karen Reed's statements. He said, I'd heard Karen Reed's statements, but I didn't really give them any note. They didn't change my opinion on my testing about how the hat got there. Was John O'Keefe wearing a hat? Could that have caused the injuries on the back of his head or some of the pattern wounds on the back of his head? Rentschler said he didn't know how the hat got there. And he goes, well, someone was wearing the hat, he got hit by a car, and then the hat came off. And Dr. Rentschler said, or somebody could have put the hat there afterwards. It could have been somewhere else and someone threw it outside. And that's what you want to have in front of the jury, is another reason to look at the house. And Brennan started asking him questions about Dr. Wolf's cell phone and text messages, and Dr. Rentschler said, I'm busy, I have a lot of text messages, and I delete them often. He remembered getting some text, and it was about what time I needed to arrive and how I would get there, where I could park. It was travel stuff. And then he was asked if he ever used Signal, if he knew what Signal was, and if Dr. Rentschler ever used Signal. He goes, I don't know what, or if Dr. Wolf used Signal or anything else. And he goes, I don't know. And he goes, you work together, didn't you? Don't you work closely with Dr. Wolf? And he goes, not really. He goes, we actually work in different, like, we worked on the same project at roughly the same time, but we don't share an office. And he goes, I know who Dr. Wolf is. I recognize him as a colleague. He goes, but we're not like super close friends or anything. Brennan stepped in it once again. He already had to eat crow with Dr. Wolf about the holes in the back of the sweatshirt coming from the forensics lab and not from getting hit by a car. Now he stepped in it again because he already kind of stepped in it with the how'd the hat get here, talking about the force of the arm. And Brennan had said, you used a lighter arm than John O'Keefe's arm. Don't you think that makes a difference? Because John O'Keefe's arm was heavier than the test arms that you used. Doesn't that make a difference? Rentschler said, yeah. That means that we underestimated the force that was used. More mass equals more force needed. So therefore, if John O'Keefe's arm was heavier, we went more conservative with going with a lighter weight arm. And after being argued about the small piece of glass that Karen had pointed out, and he was like, I don't know what anything was made of anything. And then there were no questions. Brennan asking, do you know how the taillight broke that night? And Rentschler said, no, I don't. There is no evidence of how it broke. And that's where cross ended. There was no redirect. And then, here's where the shock and all comes from, my lovelies. Brennan, after all his fighting, the dozens of motions and fighting and arguments to get Dr. Crosby to put Dr. Welcher back on the stand, he has no rebuttal witnesses. That's because he knows that Welcher would get obliterated in cross-examination. Because he's going to be asked, you said on day 22, and they can recall the transcript in court. So if he tries to say one thing, can we have that transcript read back? He claims that there were no x-rays. We had two witnesses back to back who saw x-rays from the medical examiner. How's he going to explain that? Other than, I guess you didn't read the reports very well. And he's going to go, I read them. Then why did you say there were no x-rays when there were x-rays? You were making all this argument that there could have been hairline fractures to the hand when we asked about it. And you said, well, we don't have a way of knowing because there's no x-rays. But there are x-rays that say there are no injuries to the hand, hairline, compound, or otherwise. Explain yourself. Explain why you only did one test one time for $350,000. Explain why there are no injuries to the knuckles if he's holding a glass that gets broken against a taillight that hits him directly. Explain why you moved your arm and did that. Was it because you realized as it was backing up it wouldn't have hit where you needed to hit, so to make it fit your narrative you had to move your arm? And if you knew that you didn't know exactly what position John O'Keefe was in, why didn't you test it in multiple positions to accommodate the possibilities, or the reasonable possibilities? Explain the internal elbow abrasion. Explain why you didn't have a hoodie on to do a reconstruction test. But you did say that SUVs could shoot off into space. And Dr. Crosby, he wasn't going to be of any use because the defense is just going to point out to him, but you're not a medical doctor. And who's going to come out looking better in that? Dr. Russell, who has decades and decades of medical experience, specifically in peer-reviewed articles with dog bite wounds, and she worked in the ER and saw those wounds over and over and treated them particularly? Or Dr. Crosby, who isn't even a medical doctor, who doesn't have ER emergency experience? They're not going to hold a candle to him. And I think after Dr. Rentschler's explanation of the test, pointing out so many faults from Dr. Welcher, Brennan just realized there is no recovery. And again, he is placing all his hope, all his bets on Karen Reed's statements. We'll see how that goes.